My name is Colby Kennedy. Welcome to Why Combining EX Feedback Types is Essential. You are with Reputation, a CX company, and EX, of course, is under that umbrella. We've got some really good stuff for you today. Unfortunately, we did have some technical difficulties, and one of our guests who has put the concepts that we're going to talk about today into practice is not going to be able to join us. That said, we have a quick 10, 15-minute kind of arching conceptual discussion we want to have, included with some poll questions, some interactivity. And then we are going to actually record the interview with that guest that can give you nitty-gritty details about how they've put this into action and the ROI that it's paid. And we're going to send that directly to you to watch whenever you would feel like. So don't worry, we're not going to have our guest today, but we are going to get you that interview, that conversation directly as quickly as we can, guys. So we can go ahead and go on to our next slide over here. Our speakers today are myself over here on the far right, the good-looking gentleman, Colby Kennedy, Product Marketing Manager over here at Reputation. And I'm joined by Chief Human Resources Officer here at Reputation, an EX guru, Mr. Michael Arisman. He's going to be the one leading us through a discussion today about what we're trying to get to as far as combining feedback types and what that goal is going to look like. And Lee White, our VP Communications and PR, Bright Spring Health, she is our honored guest that is not able to join us today because of technical difficulties, but we will be able to get that conversation with to you as quickly as possible. So just a little housekeeping real quick, guys. In the Q&A tab, please use that to ask questions. If you have any questions, you don't need to wait till the end. Please use that. We will have poll questions along the way, and don't use the Q&A tab for that. Don't use the Q&A tab for poll questions. Poll questions will be a pop-up box. So that way we can interact and learn from you. And also, if you want to see Reputation Solutions up in your top right screen, there's a Get Demo button, a green Get Demo button. So please go ahead and hit that if you would like to see any of our solutions. Now, our messaging is it's going to be the current climate and challenge of employee experience. What goal are we trying to achieve? And like I said, years and years of experience, Mr. Michael Arisman is going to take us through that. And then hopefully we'll be able to get that Bright Spring Health Services conversation to you, and then we'll have a Q&A. All right, so without further ado, I would love to set up our first poll question. So let's go ahead and make that go live. Don't worry about any radio silence, folks. We're here with you the whole time. We're just going to leave about 30, 40 seconds for people to answer and interact with us. So which best describes your company? We actively make EX a priority. We spend some time on EX. We do a little EX, but we could do more. We don't do any EX. So go ahead. Wow. All right, folks, it looks like we have a clear winner in the group, but we also have the other three options pretty evenly spaced out. So it looks like maybe about half of our voters said that they actively make EX a priority. Give yourselves a round of applause. You don't usually see that. That's fantastic. All right, very good. And then really evenly split between B, C, and D about spending some time, doing a little, but could do more, and don't do any. Well, I have great news for you guys. Our messaging today and what we're going to talk about, that applies to any EX maturity level, whether you've been doing it for years and you actively do it every week, every day, or you're looking to get started. So we have something very special for you no matter what with our concept of our message today. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to our main speaker today, Mr. Michael Ariseman. I will remind you to take yourself off mute if needed, but go ahead and take it away, Michael.
Great. Thank you, Colby. You can hear me okay?
Sounds great.
Excellent. Yeah, it was fantastic seeing that poll that most of you, or about half of you, are actively focusing on employee experience. And as we know, employee experience is a really broad term, by the way, that can mean a lot of different things. One of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years, and I'm sure you've experienced this in your own organizations and in your own lives, is what's been kind of labeled the Great Resignation. Now, it's not really so much a Great Resignation as it's a seismic shift in how employees view their workplace and how employees view their relationship with their organizations, specifically in a number of different areas. And we're seeing this across the board, by the way, and it's not just US based, it's across the world. We're seeing it most focused in areas where there are roles that are highly stressful to begin with, or engaging, directly with customers, retail, hospitals, et cetera, healthcare, a big one. And if we look at some of the data and what it's telling us, it's telling us insights that we have not seen before to this degree. 73% of workers want remote work to stay. Now, as you can tell, I'm working from my kitchen. In some cases, you can't work remotely, but in a lot of cases, what happened over the last couple of years and what happened with this shift of everyone having to go remote due to the pandemic, organizations are finding that people are reluctant, and I use the term reluctant somewhat lightly. It might be stronger than that. They don't want to go back into the office. They no longer want to have that type of relationship. In fact, I'm up in the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle area, and there's a number of tech companies up here, and there's been a lot of starts and stops where companies have said, okay, it's time to go back in the office, and they've discovered that their employees would rather leave the company in some cases than go back in. Now, what that does is that creates, first of all, there's some very positive things about that, right? There's some good experiences that employees can have by working remotely and balancing their personal lives and their work lives perhaps a little bit more smoothly than in the past. But it also puts pressure on this concept of employee experience, because we're no longer trying to engage people that are in similar environments and that are perhaps all together or congregated. So it's actually amplifying some of the need for employee experience because people are operating in a different way than they used to via remote. If you look at this next one, 39% of employees want to be their authentic selves at work. If we look a little closer at this, it's not just that they want to be their authentic selves, it's that they expect to be. They don't just expect to be their authentic selves at work. They expect the organization that they are working for, the managers that they work for, the coworkers they work with, to recognize, acknowledge, and engage with them in that way. That's a big shift as well. If you look about feelings of being burnt out, 54% report feeling burnt out. This gets even worse. I know many of you are probably in the healthcare industry. You'll see these numbers being much higher. Now, one of the things that directly talks to what we're employee experience and feedback and tools directly speaks to that is that often that is the role and responsibility of the HR function or the people function. And I've seen some recent studies that are pretty remarkable that one of them showed that 90% of HR people report feeling burnt out. 90%. I've seen ones that are even higher than that. So there is a challenge with all of the change that we're experiencing, and the very people that we are expecting to help organizations engage and listen to this feedback are themselves feeling burnt out. So that's a challenge. Now, I'm going to take you back a couple years, probably about 3 years ago. And, again, I've been mostly in the tech industry. I've worked all over the world the last 20, 25 years. When we looked at attrition rates, we typically would target something around 20%. Now, it might spike up a little higher depending on particular roles, might be more apt to turn over than others. But generally speaking, we were looking at around 20%. And that was kind of industry standard, at least in the tech industry on the West Coast, where I'm at, 18 to 22%. When we go out and talk to employees today, and they do these studies and they aggregate this data, employees are reporting 40% are ready to quit. This is nearly double what we've seen in the past. And so some of this is what's giving rise to this concept of the Great Resignation. Now, what does this all mean? If we take a step back, and we're all experiencing this all the time, we know that the stress we're under, we know that the world is changing and that expectations and the entire relationship that individuals have with companies is also changing. When we know all of these things, what we also know is that employee experience has always been important. It's never not been important, right? I mean, when was it okay to just not care at all what your employee said or thought or felt, right? That's never been the case. There's always been this focus that we have to tap in and create environments that attract and retain and engage our top talent and become places that people want to work. We've always known that's the case. What we're seeing though now is that this is simply accelerating. That not only is it more important that we listen and more important that we engage with our employees and understand where those things are, but that the expectations that we engage are also increasing at the same rate. So clearly we've got an opportunity here. And whether or not we consider ourselves really focused on employee experience or not enough, and I will tell you honestly, for me, I always kind of go into the we're doing some stuff, but we can always do more category because I think we always can do more. It's becoming more important for all of us, and it's becoming more expected. It's becoming more urgent, and in some ways, it's becoming more difficult. So let's go to the next slide. So what we also see is, let's see. I guess am I clicking that? Or are you clicking that, Colby?
Nope. It is on its way. There's a little bit of a lag.
Okay. All right. So what we also see with that is that this relationship to how well we engage our employees has a direct impact on our customers. Now, again, this is not new. I mean, you're smart. You're all capable individuals. You're doing great work in your organizations, and we've always known this, right? This sort of employee profit chain model has been around for 20, 25 years at least. And we understand this concept that happy employees generally tend to produce happy customers. What we're seeing though now, just like we saw with the previous data, is that this relationship is increasing. So if we look at it from the flip side, if we don't engage our employees, that has a direct impact on our organization's ability to engage our customers. And this, again, if you're in a service industry where your product is the service that you provide, then this is, again, just magnified and amplified with what we're seeing today. And you can see some of the data on here, and there's a lot of studies and stuff being done on this, but what they're all generally pointing to is the importance of engaging employees and listening to feedback. And I want to take it a step further. It's not that we simply listen to feedback, right? Because the previous model has been we engage employees, we try to tap into what they're thinking or feeling or ask them questions, et cetera. We'll talk about the different various means that are available to collect this data. And then what we typically do is we react to it. So we get information and we want to create that loop. We want to create that loop of I listen to you, I ask you some information, you share that with me, I act on it, right? And to the extent that we create that loop, we better position our organizations for success because number one, we learn more because a lot of times our employees, in particular our frontline employees, have direct insights into what's going on with our business and what's going on with our customers. So it's really important to tap into it. But in addition to that, it's how do we get out in front of it? How do we take the learnings that we have and the sentiment that we're hearing and the feedback that we're getting and not just respond to it, but use that as a way to proactively package what we're doing back to our employees in a way that utilizes that input. And that's something a little bit more difficult because the model typically has been, I ask you some feedback in a survey. It takes a while to collect that. Then I pull the data and I put some people on it and then we respond to that, right? And that sort of time lag between when we get the information and how we respond to it regardless of how well we respond to it, is still always reactionary. But what if we could tap into data a little bit more live? What if we could not just get sentiment that we asked employees for? Well, what if we could tap into sentiment that employees are saying about us? And what if we had that live every day and we could use that information to help us position perhaps things that we're already doing? Be able to communicate it to our employees in a way that resonates directly with the feedback they're providing. And that's where I think the opportunity is in the future. All of the things that we've done up until this point, and to various degrees, right? There's a lot of great products out there, and there's a lot of great approaches out there to listen to information and provide that feedback. But again, it's mostly been reactionary. It's mostly been trying to get information from yesterday and respond to it tomorrow. What we want to try to shift to is how do we get information live every day and are able to proactively use that information in the work that we do. So that's where I think that this is all headed, and super excited to be here to talk to you about it.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Those are all excellent points. Love those stats up there from Forbes. Guys, we're gonna go into our next poll question. So let's go ahead and make that live over there on the back end. Poll question number 2: is your company combining internal and external EX data? Yes, somewhat, not sure, not at all. And this really feeds into what we're going to get to, and Michael just hinted at in this next section right here. Are you combining internal data, such as surveys, with external data, such as reviews on Glassdoor, Indeed, or social comments? So once again, don't mind the radio silence, guys. We're going to put up this poll for a little bit and then see what our results look like.
Sounds like we need some music, Colby.
Yeah, right. Some Jeopardy or something like that, right? I was thinking about that same thing. We'll leave it up for a few more seconds, guys, here. But looks like the clear winner. We have a clear winner again. See right there, not sure, that's really interesting because I think we are going to get into some territory that a lot of people have not really been exploring within the EX space. So, but we do have a curious amount of 9 votes that say yes. So I'd like to, I'm glad that some people are a little bit ahead of the curve out there. But we can go ahead and close that poll. We can get back to our media over here. And Michael, once again, please take it away. We're talking about getting a complete picture.
Yeah, and so let's stop and think about the reality of this. And again, I appreciate that poll. And a lot of us are combining this data in some ways, right? So in other words, we are aware of it, and we're perhaps engaging with Glassdoor or Indeed, or we're looking at LinkedIn and other kind of social media. And we're certainly doing things internally as well. The challenge with this is let's look at both categories separately for a second. So internally, this is kind of what candidates, employees are willing to say to us, right? So we ask them directly. And again, I want to draw an analogy between how we think about employee experience with how companies think about customer feedback, right? Because if you go buy a product, if you go to a store, or you go to get a service like a hospital or something, and you'll get a survey. Oftentimes you'll get a direct survey and you can respond to that. But then also you have the ability to just go talk to friends and family and post things and wherever you happen to feel like about that service. And those are different things. So internally, if we break that one down, I think most of us are probably doing some sort of employee engagement surveys. Sometimes the classic way to do that was once a year, but there's some different approaches out there. You do pulse surveys, you can do those a couple times a year, you can do them more often, you can target specific things. In addition, there are other parts of the business that you may also want to engage with, surveying your employees, in their first 60, 90 days to get a sense of how their onboarding went is really valuable information. Doing exit surveys when employees leave and trying to collect that data and say, what was the sentiment? What was the thing that may have driven you to want to make this decision? And, or what did you love about working here? There's a lot of amazing data. So if we think about it from an internal standpoint, the goal is not just to engage, but how do we synthesize all that together? So we're getting sort of this clear, consistent picture. Now we go look at external. And like many of us, we have Glassdoor. We might even be actively engaging with Glassdoor. So we've built an account and we actively post things on there. We respond to feedback that we get on Glassdoor. But it's usually a motion that's entirely separate. So it requires you to go into Glassdoor and engage via that website in particular. And often what I hear from leaders in particular about Glassdoor is a little bit of skepticism of, well, yeah, I mean, there's sentiment on there, but it's usually just the people that were really upset or just the people that maybe really were positive, and we're not really capturing kind of that sentiment in the middle that's more representative. And so the opportunity is what if we combine all of that together? Not because we're asking some HR people to literally do it, to go and look at different sites and themselves sort of sync it together. But what if the technology could do it automatically and feed it back to you live? And that's where I think there's a lot of excitement in where this is going, because you're trying to get both of those perspectives. You're trying to get a fuller picture of your organization and how people engage with you. We know what they will say to us. And we also know if you've been doing surveys for a while, what you know is if you have a focus group and then you look at the survey data, you often get different things, right? Because people will say one thing in a survey. One of my favorite questions is when you ask people about compensation, right? I mean, well, you should always check, I'm horribly, low paid, because somebody might give you more money, right? So are you really getting a sentiment about compensation, or are you kind of asking a leading question, right? So we know a lot of the data that we get via internal is also kind of leading the witness a little bit by the questions that we ask and how we ask those questions. External data is not limited that way. External data, people can just go on and say whatever they want to, and so the power of combining those together is really important. And if we flip to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what happens when we look at that data and we combine it. Because if we only look at internal data, if we only look at what our employees are saying while they're here, we might get one set of feedback. We might say, okay, these are the areas that our employees are saying are working really well, or maybe these are the areas that we have to make the most improvement in. So, and it's pretty classic approach where you say, okay, what's the most important thing, and what are the areas that we have the most improvement, and let's go tackle those. Let's try to go get some low-hanging fruit here. Let's try to respond to that. But what's interesting is when we start pulling in all of that external data, and instead of looking at those as two completely separate things, we actually look at the measuring the sentiments as being the same, as it's just all feedback and it's all data. And when we combine it together, we get a different view. Some things might show up a little bit more prominently when we look at it all combined. Some things might end up being less important. Some things might end up being more important. The reality is, though, what we're getting is a more complete picture. And that's really the goal. And, what I mentioned earlier about people feeling burned out, and in particular, the HR function. And look, I've been chief people officer for a long time. I've led HR organizations, all over the world in a variety of industries, everything from startups to I've been with a couple Fortune 1 companies with 100,000 employees all over the world. So I've seen various models of this. And when we think about that data, we think about that feedback that we get, and we think about the context in which we provide it, we can require our people, our HR people who are already burned out, who are already struggling, and say, oh, now I need you to do something extra. Not only do I want you to help me manage this survey and get this information out and collect it back and then partner with the business leaders to come up with solutions, but I also want you to go and interact with all of these external websites. And the reality of it is this is a lot of work and it's a lot of effort and people are burnt out. And one of the things that I've discovered over the years, and it's a lot of organizations put too much pressure on their HR or people functions to do this work. Because when you're in an HR function, you can certainly facilitate the processes, but you don't really own the environments in which most of these employees are working, right? Employees are experiencing that through their management chain or experiencing that maybe differently depending on where they work within the company or the org. And so that HR function has too much pressure on it sometimes to try to be able to pull these sentiments up and to try to feed it back. And usually at best, what we can do is we can collect the data, as I mentioned before, and sort of give it to you in arrears. Okay, so here's the summary reports. A lot of tools can do a good job of that too, but here's the summary report of what we just did, and we just did this survey feedback, and here's what it says, and here's what my suggestions are on what we ought to do about it. But what if we had the technology to sync it all together live? What if we had the ability where you didn't have to go even to 3 or 4 different places? You could go into one dashboard and you could see it all live and you could see it all combined and you could interact with all of it in the same manner. The idea behind this is, number one, to get better data, to get a more full picture of what employee sentiment really is so we can better equip ourselves to engage with it. But the other issue is to be able to have that information live at our fingertips. And be able to spend the sort of the opportunity cost issue, to be able to spend the time, the limited time we have, on what are we going to do about the feedback, as opposed to spending most of our time on getting the feedback. And that's where I think there's a huge, huge opportunity here.
Yeah. I love it, Michael. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's fantastic information and really gets us towards what we're going for our goal. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more poll question for you. Then we're going to talk about what the goal we're trying to get to. And then we're going to take a few questions from the audience. We do have a few that have come in so far. So let's go ahead and make that poll live. And once again, don't mind the radio silence, but the poll question number 3, how many people work on EX or how many people are on your HR team? This would be interesting to know because we do know that some EX or HR teams are a little strapped for resources and people. So let's give our attendees a second to answer. All right, guys, looks like most of our votes are in right now. Looks like a majority of us, we've had clear winners on all of them, which is kind of a rarity for poll questions, but looks like we have some well-staffed HR or EX teams. I really love that. That's the majority of us has said 5 or plus. And then everything else, once again, real split. Some people out there, teams of 1, 2, or 3, some of them 4, but pretty even split around that. Pretty fantastic. Thank you guys for that information. That really helps us cater our message and what we want to talk about to you. But Michael, let's go ahead and touch on the end goal of what we're trying to get to very quickly. So that way we can get over to our poll questions and give you guys a message about that conversation, that interview that's going to happen. That'll be sent to you.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, my response to that poll as well is that's fantastic. When I think about our own organization, sometimes I didn't see a 0.5 person option or only on Tuesdays kind of option. So when you have smaller organizations, it really becomes kind of a shared responsibility. But it's great that we have organizations that have dedicated people to be able to do this, because it's critically important. So look, the end goal, and we've been talking about this quite a bit, is essentially to serve up to you the information live that you need to see, to be able to integrate different kinds of internal feedback. So certainly your annual feedback, your annual employee surveys, your pulse surveys, but also maybe new hire orientation surveys, maybe surveys you do about particular things that happen throughout the year. It may be exit interview data, and combine that with the live feedback that you're getting every day through your social media sources. Be able to sync that together and then feed it back to you live. So you can see this is where the sentiment is going. And you'll be able to click on this and get a full sentiment map around a number of different areas. So, what's hot, what's trending right now, maybe benefits, pops as a real issue in a particular time of year, or because of some changes. Maybe there's other factors that come up based on what's happening within your organization. But you'll be able to see that live 24 hours a day and have it fed to you real time. It'll also enable you, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just that you get information and feedback back in a way that you can respond to. It's that you get that information ahead of time or live, so you can use it proactively and how you go out and message what you do as well. So that's the goal. And it's really powerful. If for customers and people who have used our customer feedback or reputation customer, it's data, it's fantastic. It gives you all this live version, works exactly the same way for employee sentiment. So it's an incredibly powerful tool that we'd love to talk to you a little bit more about. But that's the goal. The goal is to be able to take this information. We understand how important it is, be able to feed it back to you in a way where you get to go spend your time on what we're going to do about the information, not spending your time trying to better collect it. Yeah. And that's really the vision.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that vision for what we are trying to get to. We have a time for just a couple of questions that have come in. And then I want to speak to you guys about that interview that's coming your way. But Michael, looks like the first one is, what's the best way to act on the feedback that you do get? We're talking about all this feedback coming in. What's the best way to act on the feedback that you do actually get?
Well, I think the best way is to do something, right? There's the only thing worse than not asking people for feedback is asking them and then not acting on it. So part of it is just to listen and to create that loop. So it depends on what the data, right? In some cases, you'll get feedback around particular policies, or maybe around things that are lacking in the business, maybe a lack of career development opportunities, or maybe some challenges with compensation or clarity around resources, training and development. Pretty common things. The idea is to engage and do something and keep that flywheel going. What employees want more than ever is to feel listened to and feel valued. And we showed that data earlier. The expectations that employees have that they have a voice and that voice matters and that you will listen to it is continuing to increase. So I think the best way to do it is just to engage as quickly as you can in providing sometimes just a simple, as a result of your feedback, we're now going to do this. That's one of the things that's been surprising to me over the last 20 years or so of doing this, is a lot of times organizations I've been with have actively listened to feedback and actively responded to it, but never really connected the dots for employees. And so the fact that employee sentiment came in and the fact that the company made some changes as a result was kind of left to people to kind of hopefully connect the dots on their own, as opposed to being very specific and deliberate about saying, this new change we're rolling out is as a result of the feedback that you've provided us. So keep it up, keep telling us what we can do to get better and how we can improve. There's so much variety in the kinds of feedback you get and the circumstances in which your organization might be operating in, that there's no one size fits all approach here. But the one thing that's universal is to create that loop and to engage.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Awesome. And I know we're running out of time here, but I do want to get to one more because I really like this question. I think it's something that everybody's dealt with at some point in their career, but how do you get buy-in from leadership? This may be a new idea to somebody, combining internal, external, or even just trying to make EX priority. So how do you get buy-in from leadership?
Yeah, one of the things that I've discovered personally is that leaders love data. They love data. In fact, whatever data you give them, they typically want more of it. right? So however you provide them information, they're like, oh, wow, can I have it cut this way or that way? So I don't think that there's a big challenge in getting buy-in to, number one, the importance of it. But getting buy-in from the value of having that information and having that information more readily is something that most of your leaders already fundamentally understand in other parts of the business. So if you are working, for example, in finance, you want to be able to get information, your FP&A information, information regarding spends and budgets, et cetera, as quickly as you can and as accurately as you can. If you're looking for your sales data, you want to get that fast and quick and be able to get that accurately so you can make business decisions. And this is no different. This is important data that's critical to effectively running your organization well. And so I think the buy-in comes from showing your leadership team the value of what happens when you get a much more complete set of information, much faster and much, and more live and more real time to be able to inform what you then go do. So, I think that the challenge around getting buy-in isn't that difficult from a conceptual standpoint. A lot of times the challenge is what happens and what do you do as a result of the feedback, and that of course gets complicated by a number of factors that you're all dealing with, right? Which is, the availability of resources and prioritizations and other kinds of things. But I think getting the feedback is really valuable. And usually executives, when you present them this data, their eyes light up and they want to know more.
Yeah. Awesome. I know there are a few other questions over here. But sorry, guys, I know we're running out of time. So I do just want to remind everybody, guys, that I'm really sorry about today's technical difficulties. We were, there we go. We were not able to get Lee White online. But please know that we are going to record our conversation with her and then send it out to all registrants, attendees, or otherwise. She has done some great work over at Bright Spring Health on putting the ideas that we've talked about today into action, right? Actually using these ideas and seeing some ROI from it, some benefits from it, and how that's worked and the challenges she faced throughout her process. So we really want to get that conversation out to you guys, and wanted to say thank you so much for spending time with us. I know it might not have been exactly what you expected, but we really appreciate you guys logging on and seeing what we have to say. But on behalf of myself, Michael, and Reputation, I'd like to say thank you so much, and please have a great day.
Thanks all.